and welcome to the Innovation Podcast. And we have a very exciting topic today. It's about Starlink. How are you feeling about this topic?
I love talking about Starlink. Very excited to talk about it with you.
All right, let's dive right into it. So, as I was doing my reading, currently Starlink has about 5,874 satellites in the sky, and it has an approval 12,000 satellites in the sky. And it has put on a proposal for 30,000 satellites in the sky. So ideally, there should be 30,000, but it got an approval for 12,000, and now currently has, let's just say, around 6,000 up in the sky. So what do you think about that?
It's just so cool. I mean, you're beaming internet from space, right? It's such an advanced technology. I'll give an example. One of the things that will remain firmly embedded in my memory as an innovation practitioner, consultant, is that I was working with a client, a telco, a large well-known telco here. And this was it was 2016, 2016, when SpaceX was just starting to get moving and Musk started to about like a Starlink-like system.
Right. There was no name at that point yet.
Yeah. Well, I don't believe there was. Yeah.
But it was just talking about
we're going to build space internet, this kind of stuff, right? And I remember saying to the senior leaders on this telco, like, guys, this is coming. It's coming in the next, 10, 15, it's on the horizon. It's not 50, 100 years away. It's like the next decade or something. And they just laughed at me. They thought it was ridiculous. It was the dumbest thing they've ever heard. They literally laughed at me. Like, I felt like an idiot. Like,
it's true. Something now.
A little bit more vindicated, I think, because, one of the things that you have to learn as an innovation professional is to understand, at least try to understand exponential change and growth. And what these, professionals were used to is sort of the pace of change for the last decade or two. A fairly linear rate of change in space travel. Nothing's really changed.
Yeah.
Whereas what SpaceX, and of course by extension Mr. Musk, brings is this exponential acceleration of the technology and the technologies around it. But it's not just the satellites, obviously the rockets that launch the satellites, right? Here's the answer with it.
The whole ecosystem.
The whole ecosystem. And so, now it's 2024 and it's live. It's not only live, it's playing a critical factor in the biggest war that the world has seen in quite some time, right? The Ukraine war. Without Starlink, the Ukrainian side would have crumbled.
Yes.
They really would. There's no two ways of saying that. So it's extraordinary. It's absolutely extraordinary. And as you're saying, with the way in which the density is going to develop, of course, how sophisticated it is. We still walk around with 5G. It is going to be just free internet from space, right? And then you have Wi-Fi and other stuff. But the whole concept that it's another level of thinking, right? It's like we're still living like cavemen, but they've invented electrical grids. Mm-hmm. Like the things that will flow from this are just massive because it makes viable a need for space thinking. Because now you have to maintain all those satellites. So that now you're going to go into space and maintain them. And then you probably want to put a few space stations up and you put them there. It drives the feedback loop where we have reasons for why we want to go into space more. And that in turn, will drive that. It's a bit sort of the analogy might be useful to compare it to the Americas originally. Yes, there were indigenous people there that had their own vibrant realities. And so for the beginning, especially for the Europeans, it wasn't actually that much interesting stuff there. So only when they started to find a bit of gold and things started, it wasn't like they discovered the Americas and like, oh my God, it's amazing, we'll go there. Like the first colony, I believe, Jamestown, I believe it died, right? The festival of Thanksgiving exists in America because basically all the local colonists were going to die, but the local indigenous people came to give them food so they wouldn't die and survived. That's what they give thanks for. So, the frontiers are always very tricky. And so what I think this sort of represents is a leap in terms of strategic thinking of how you contribute towards humanity. And building on our earlier conversation, I think one of the things that Musk does is he generates an order of magnitude more superior state of consciousness than his peer equivalents at other large management, industrial companies that ran other management bureaucracy. As we were covering earlier, the problem with the management bureaucracy is it has no higher cause. It is not noble. There's no sense of duty. It's just make as much money as you can, as quickly as you can, and try to skip the consequences and responsibilities of that, by and large. Because you just maximize shareholder returns, right? Whereas the mission of SpaceX, and this is in the founding charter of the company, is to make humans interplanetary. It is not to maximize shareholder returns. So there's a much greater mission, and whatever you want to say about that, but it causes them to reach much further. And so their level of thinking and what they're thinking about is going to be vastly superior in its ability and awareness of what reality can be compared to your telco executives. Those guys are still just thinking about, maybe continental networks, national networks of base stations and, the usual phenomena of the telco ecosystem. These guys are building something that's completely it's the stuff of science fiction or fantasies, right? And here it is today. And so it's just the beginning of an architecture that is already changing the world, will only continue to do so.
But what really amazes me is that human leap, right? Like we have so far from I don't know, the first year the satellites were launched, but so far in human history, we have launched about 14,000 satellites. And now we're going to go to 30,000 satellites in like very much that lesser time frame, right? So there's a huge leap happening there in humankind, right?
And that doesn't include the others. Blue Origin is joining in, right? The China is getting pretty good at launching rockets. Yeah, I think Japanese are on their way. Right? The Europeans are still trying to figure their stuff out, and the Russians are having a bit of difficulty.
Well, India has been doing well.
Fantastic point, right? India, right? And so it's it's there, and so I think that Starlink just represents this wonderful concept of a unified data space for humanity that kind of democratizes access to information and makes it possible that anyone anywhere can access it. Because, for example, like a country like the Philippines faces a lot of challenges because it's a country of many, many islands.
Yeah.
And you can't just lay fiber optic cables everywhere like you can.
Right.
And, it's difficult to build across the island. So how do you do it, right? And so having Starlink base stations everywhere is a very powerful way of addressing that solution. And suddenly now you're digitally enabling the local people. Suddenly they can start to use QR codes. And what a lot of Westerners don't know about Southeast Asia, particularly like Malaysia, runs significantly on QR codes, right? We all use QR codes. It's not just credit cards. And so you enable digital technologies. And so if you can start getting digital finance, you can start accessing things like Grab. You can start paying for things with QR code, right? People even from low income environments can benefit. Everyone can, right? But particularly addressing things like the digital divide and being able to invite people to make that leap into the digital world, right? Because there's still many people in the world who don't. Right? It's difficult to imagine that, but it's true. Right? There's still billions of people who haven't really used the internet or smartphones or benefited from it. Like literally billions. Right? And so what, seems Starlink can play a significant role in enabling that next wave. I can't remember what the number is. It's maybe 1 or 2, 3 billion, but it's like the next 2 to 3 billion, getting them online, maybe, through Starlink. Right. Because they're in areas that are difficult to reach. It's too expensive to reach them.
Oh man, if it's like enabling, let's just say around 3 more billion people to get on the internet, that's like massive uses to all of these.
Absolutely.
Like Google, OpenAI, Grab, right? So their valuation is going to go up too. Because oh man.
So this is, why, well, this could be, one of the reasons they're one of the most valuable privately held companies. I believe it's over $100 billion. But I think, what drives that is that Musk is a man on a mission. And I think he's driven by his sense of duty to be able to pursue that and to sincerely commit himself to it in a way that I think management professionals, by virtue of taking on the identity of being a management professional, will find difficult because there's something spiritual in it. There's something deeper. I think it's something that can be neatly addressed with the question of why are you here on Earth? You are here to contribute something. So why not create something noble and good, right? And whether that's making life interplanetary or whether that is accelerating transition to electric vehicles with Tesla, right? And other ventures, I think what he's able to generate is that capacity to dream further. Telco executives would never produce that Starlink. There's no telco on Earth that would have produced it. They tried a little bit with what's called the Iridium network. It's just satellite phones, right? And part of the challenge with that system was, if I'm correct, I believe it's based on satellites in geosynchronous orbit, which means they are very far away from the Earth, like really, really far away. They have to be that far away because they then stay in the same position and rotate at the speed of the orbit. But the problem with the satellite being so far away is you create lag because the signal has to transmit from you to the station to the satellite that's very far away, bounce back off the satellite to your friend you're calling. And that creates delay. And that delay is a hard physics problem because it's just that far away. It just takes light that long to travel.
Yes.
So you're constrained by the speed of light. Whereas what Musk is doing with the Starlink satellites is they're much lower. They're they're like 90% closer to Earth. Like if the satellites are 10 centimeters away, these guys are only 1 centimeter away. So it's really, really, really different. And there's loads of them and they're relatively cheap. So he can just keep pumping up satellites cheaply. And of course, he benefits from the learning, the learning feedback loops of launching so many rockets, right? So he's launching loads of rockets. He's learning how to launch rockets well. They're learning how to position satellites well.
Mass produce rockets as well.
So that mass production of cheapness drives that learning that you can, the experience you can only gain by launching 1,000 rockets. And that in turn opens up new possibilities, right? Which are unique. So it's such a brilliant project, so audacious, right? But it's truly remarkable. And I think it's worth noting that where it comes from, as opposed to, for example, maybe you might have thought like the telco industry or something like that.
But I think when you're comparing telco industries to Starlink, I think that's a paradigm shifter, because you're the one who told me that, you can't expect people who were breeding horses to be able to go to the car manufacturing company.
Yes.
And I think that's very much similar to what we're talking about here, like optical fibers under the ocean bed to satellites in the space.
Yes.
It's literally two different paradigms.
Right.
In the literal sense, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I don't think it makes, I don't think we're going to still need optical cables, probably even more.
Mm-hmm.
But there's new frontiers open up with that thinking that comes from periphery, from the outlier, the wild card, right? And so I think it's just, it demonstrates sort of the power of learning to think in paradigms and understanding that their nature is such that you are always the core will never innovate itself out of existence. What that means is the existing telcos are never going to find a model that replaces them, because it's not in their interest to replace themselves.
Right, right.
Ford is never going to invent a car that removes the need for Ford combustion. They're just not. It doesn't make sense. You've always got this sort of, it's deeper than the innovator's dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
It's that, I guess you could sort of, maybe say the concept of the innovator's dilemma expanded to a level of an organization where you're just like, we're not going to produce, the taxi companies are never going to create Uber.
Right. Right.
Right. Another example, right? So, Blockbuster is never going to create Netflix. Right. So when you see these case studies over and over and over again, you see the incumbent is in the incumbent position. It has to be an outlier, it comes from a different space. And what powers them is that their mastery of this new technology. So Netflix defeats Blockbuster because of their ability to master digital technology. Right. And so SpaceX will master space because of its ability to master this new technology of Starlink and rockets launching and landing at the same time. Right. That's why in one of the earlier podcasts, even though Toyota has it's the largest car company in the world, is making record profits and is absolutely smashing it.
Mm-hmm.
Well done, Toyota, by the way. That's pretty awesome. And the new Prius looks fantastic. Nevertheless, I'm a man of studies the frameworks and studies the patterns. And, it's exactly at that moment when you're most vulnerable to disruption, because what Toyota has the least amount of experience in is building electric vehicles.
It is.
And yes, you have the plug-in hybrids like the Toyota Prius, but they're not the same. There was that transition time from feature phones to smartphones where you had these halfway phones.
Right.
But it wasn't an iPhone. But it could do some email and maybe show a picture or two, had a camera, but it wasn't really, there. Right? That's how I see hybrids. Popular for a while, but they don't have the legs that it's not going to be sustainable. And so you might say, oh yeah, we'll do the hybrids and then we'll transition, but you've missed the point. You're on the wrong paradigm, because what matters is the learning. So let's say to compete with Musk, you need to build a company that, regardless of how amazing what you did, you haven't done 1,000 rocket launches. So you just don't have that experience and you don't have that understanding. And that's something you can only get by launching 1,000 rockets. So you need to so by the time you've launched 1,000 rockets, he's probably launched 10,000 rockets. So they have this incredible head start and they're making the best out of it. And then I think it's just wonderful to see that taking place with something that I believe in what he's saying. I think he's trying to democratize it. Now, of course, he has his agenda, but is the world a better place for having Starlink in place? I believe so, yeah.
Well, on that note, Jan, is the world a better place? Well, given that there will be, right now, 12,000 satellites have been approved to go up there, and there are already talks of it can all create a collision hazard, it can affect climate change, and there's also, I was checking at that point, that, the space is a cultural heritage that we should protect and not be sending so many satellites. So do you think that it is all in the white space, or
what does the white space mean? Like
the white space, like good, noble, advancing humanity? Or do you think a massive sort of, or maybe activists will come up and say, oh, you don't want these satellites of this, or maybe it can cause collision hazard that is affecting people as well, lives are being, I don't know, affected?
Well, those are all great points, and they're definitely true. But it's an indication of an immature mindset when you think that one truth must be supreme over all others. What that means is it necessary? Okay, fine. And maybe we should think about the heritage of space in a similar way that we thought about conservation, that we have national parks that guarantee to be relatively free spaces, right, that are not developed. Are there issues around having too much collisions in space? Yeah, it's a sensible point. But we also have lots of car crashes. Should we just have less cars on the road and we just say, sorry guys, I can't have cars? Too many crashes.
Interesting.
Right? I mean, maybe it's just better that we design better cars, teach people how to use them more clearly, right? And just address it in that way, right? That would, I think, be more prudent, because we would then get the benefit of the car, right? Which is quite a significant benefit. Because, as someone, and again, it's not for us, we're fortunate to be in a fortunate place, but there are real issues around the digital divide.
Mm-hmm.
And places that can't have access to a high-speed internet, if you're saying to them, sorry, mate, collisions in space are dangerous, you can't get Starlink now, so you and your entire village and all your kids can't learn, can't watch YouTube, don't get Spotify, no Netflix, not connected to the world. But, at least you won't get depression from social media, right? I mean,
that's a funny way to put it.
But on the other hand, you don't get to meet all those influencers, and that can be very eye-opening for some people. So I think we have to be careful. I just find it very, when these arguments come with such a charged term, right? We've missed the opportunity to say there's good points, and let's integrate them into the conversation and let's address them.
It's just a clever way, just an intelligent way of looking at it.
Yes, yeah, and I think that is going to be able to just be so transformational. We are. I always think the best way to kind of understand Industry 4.0, where we're at right now, is to go back 100 years to 1924 and look at the progress of electrification. Malaysia was not electrified 100 years ago. There were no light bulbs in Malaysia, essentially. There's maybe some gas lamps, right? But at night, it was candles and dark, and the darkness is very dark. And so that's why electrification is the national project to create electricity at scale for all individuals and serving it at a price point where we don't think about it. Right now we have the lights and AC running, and I'm not thinking about the cost. Now, I think most of us are in a position where we're quite blessed about this. We might be a little bit pressured on the cost, but it's still something that's like water. It's not like gold. So what electrification did is it completely changed the nature of reality in the sense that you could now plug in a machine and you have a light, right? Or a television or a radio. I mean, this is miraculous stuff, right? And so you went from an environment where there's no electricity flowing around in a human-controlled manner to suddenly it's there. And that just is the foundation of all modern existence. We couldn't exist today without aircon, right? Without all the pumps and everything else that run through electricity, right? Everything works through electricity. So we are, in that sense, the equivalent in terms of where data is present in reality.
Mm-hmm.
And what's going to happen in this century is that data is going to become ubiquitous and information is going to become ubiquitous in the same way that electricity is ubiquitous.
Right.
Right. And so, you can think of Starlink as a global engineering project. Create a asset for humanity that allows the free flow of information that transcends any government. Musk is a guy who can say no to Putin. Putin can launch a war, but Musk can keep the internet on. There's nothing Putin can do about it. That's pretty amazing.
Unless he shoots.
Unless he shoots. Yeah. So I think there's because of the space to be like, if you said essentially like mutually assured destruction, we shoot everything shoots at that space is fun. I mean, you have a really good bomb. Actually, I'm terrible. Yes, I don't think so. I don't think he would do that. So that's I think what Starlink promises. Now, of course, it's controlled by one man. True, but he had the balls to set it up. So swings and roundabouts. Why don't we have other ballsy people turn up and do that, set up their own ones? Because, for example, the UK government tried to set up something called OneWeb to compete with Musk, and I don't think he's losing any sleep over it. Put it like that. They're still trying to get their shit together. Richard Branson tried to do a launch where they dropped a space plane off a 747, and that didn't work. Virgin Galactic hasn't really gone anywhere. Blue Origin is getting things done, but it's not at the level that SpaceX is, right?
But I think SpaceX has been doing so many more iterations. As you've said, there have been learnings from the launches and the failures of the launch, right?
And so that's why I think it's the expression of there is a superior state of consciousness in SpaceX. And at the heart of that, I believe, really the living core of it is that mission to make life interplanetary. That is what drives that level of excellence and level of discipline and desire and drive and execution. You're rising to a higher, noble purpose, and that's what motivates and mobilizes the spirit of humans within that organization. Because it's worth noting that there is no other country or company on Earth that can do what they do. The US government can't do it, the Russian government can't do it, the Chinese government can't do it. It's literally the only company on Earth that can do it, right? Launch rockets into space and land them again and build a global network of internet satellites that can provide anywhere on the globe high-speed, high-quality internet for an affordable price. It's utterly unique. And so I think when we see such uniqueness, we should take a moment to consider where has that come from? And ultimately it's come from people's states of consciousness. It's come from people, right? Literally people have made this. So why can't we get these people to do that in other companies like Boeing, right? Or in the Chinese government? Lots of very clever people, lots of money, right? You got people, you got money, you got time, you got talent, you got technology, you got everything. They still can't do it.
Again, it's becoming more clear and clearer to me that because the paradigm, right?
Yeah.
Boeing is very good at flying people across the oceans, lands, but not really into space.
Well, they haven't made the paradigm leap, right? The audacity of what Musk did was to just say, rather than throwing the rocket away, let's just have it land again. And I mean, everyone thought that was just, and I think this is a correct technical term, like batshit crazy. Like, it's not like loco crazy. It's like, this is the dumbest, most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. We're going to launch a rocket and it's going to land on its, like, it's a pencil, right? It's like we're going to throw a pencil into space and that pencil's going to land on its tip, on its end. That's ridiculously dumb, but he's done it. And so that's the paradigm leap, right? That capability, and it's a manufacturing paradigm leap. Maybe in a similar sense of Ford, right? Maybe comparisons to Henry Ford in terms of he didn't invent the motor car, but he made the paradigm leap in terms of the manufacturing abilities.
I want to ask you something about the noise, right? So, I mean, there were noise before when like this sort of humanity leap was happening, and now the noise have been amplified because of social media and I would say mostly Gen Z, right? So the noise in terms of
noise.
Like climate change activists and in the collision hazard, like we were saying, the very naive thinking, or what was the term you were using earlier?
Oh, that one truth must be supreme.
You're right, exactly. So from electrification, right, up until where we are today, the noises have been there, right? And now the noises are getting more amplified because of what I've said, social media and Gen Z and stuff. But do you think people are going to take a step back from development because of concerns of climate and being politically right, or all these woke terms? Not woke terms, but how do you say, like, you don't want to be in the wrong, right? And I think Musk is one person who doesn't give any cent about giving the right or wrong. He's just sort of going ahead and doing things, right? But what about all the other companies? Do you think they're sort of holding back because of, getting backlashes, or you get the point, right? Like,
but I want to be a bit. I'm going to take it in unexpected, but probably, if you know me, expected direction, which is I disagree. I think Musk is very concerned with good and evil.
Mhm.
I think he spends a lot of time on it. I think he just has a superior state of consciousness.
Mhm.
And I mean superior in the sense of, for example, Usain Bolt is vastly superior to me at 100 meter sprinting, right? It's not even comparable, right?
Yeah.
The guy, it's not even a comparison, right? And I'm actually reasonably fast. Like, I can hold my own. I'm quite good. Like, at some level.
Never seen you running, but okay.
I've seen you ever run either.
What am I talking about? Comparing myself to Usain fucking Bolt, man. You are.
All right. Okay. How do we go humbler? Okay. I mean, I was hoping to make myself the butt of the joke.
Okay.
It's just in my foolishness of comparing myself to Usain Bolt, we see how silly it is, right? Because there's nothing even to compare. He's obviously just vastly superior. And what I want to try and get at is that difference in superiority. So as much as he's better at that, right? Or Jamie Dimon is better than me, or like at being a CEO of American Stock, about being a banker, right? The guy is sort of rock star in his own terms too, right? So I think we have this myth in today's age about this concept of equality, that we're all kind of the same. And it is true, we are in some sense.
Mhm.
But in other senses, we're not. There are some people who build abilities that are thousands, tens of thousands, millions of percent more superior than what an ordinary eye can produce. And so they're just getting on with it. And they are engines of creation and protection and destruction. And they're operating at different levels of tiers of reality that you just don't get it. Right? You don't get it. You're not going to get it because you're not near that level of capability. So that's where I think there just needs to be an appreciation for what's happening there. But on the other hand, he is only one man, and a mortal man, and a flawed man, a fallible man as well. He's not a god as such. And so it also has the limitations of that, right? So I think there can be potentially an opportunity to be kind. And I think part of being kind is an element of being respectful, which is to be able to see the good things he does, and then also maybe the shadow side. So that's an inherent, I think, requirement if you want to see something clearly. If you just want to be right and be like, oh, he's this or he's that, then fine, be right. Okay, feel better about yourself. Is that a useful description? It's a bit limited. It's not really, doesn't mean anything other than serving your own ego, right? It's more about, look at what this extraordinary human is doing in terms of driving these transformational industries, in this case, Starlink, right? So in such an utterly unique way. So I think that's what we've kind of have to roll with. There are just going to be people like this, and I think it's good that he's on our Team Humanity side, that he is doing what he's doing. I mean, he could just be having a great time, like, you could just live a really good life, right? You really could. But from what I understand, he doesn't have a home. He travels around. He works furiously hard.
He has a home. It's just that he's...
No, he doesn't. I don't believe he owns a house.
Isn't it? He doesn't have it like from wherever he's traveling. Like for example, the Twitter office. He doesn't have a home there, so he was sort of settling.
Yeah, you say, but he doesn't like have a big $1 billion house where he lives, and like his mansion with his yacht, and so I mean, the guy works his ass off. Clearly,
I think he's in Bali right now for the launch in Indonesia. Or was it in Bali last week? I need to go meet him. That's what I'm saying.
That'd be cool. Be nice to meet him. But let's come back to Starlink, right?
Right.
What do you think? Where do you think it will go in the future?
Right. Yeah. So he's in Indonesia. He's in Bali right now. I think it will, as to what you've said, it comes down to, I'm not too sure about the vision of being interplanetary because I can't make that leap in my mind, right? Because I think I'm not there. My brain cells have not really understood how it's going to make that leap. But when it comes to sort of giving internet to people in villages, as you've said, education, I think that triumphs over all the other noise that people, because when you type Starlink and about the density of satellites, that's what you see. And in the video you sent me, right? And if you look at the comments, that's what you see. People are saying that, he's going to destroy the planet. It's just too many satellites out there. It's not good for the climate and those were the noise that I was reading and I was like, okay, I don't think that's what Jan was talking about. So in the video comments, right? And when I was reading the article, 80% of the article was about what are the hazards he's causing. Yeah. So I think we should rise above that and see what are the wins we're going to get as humans.
Yeah, I agree with you in that sense of the measure of progress. We should keep in mind those conversations. I think, again...
And as I said, find ways around it, right? Like try ways not to collide with the satellites.
Yes, exactly. Well, I think there's just this element of, so we shouldn't do it because it's going to, for example, create more space trash and create problems, right? Well, so, okay. Oh, you know what? That's a great comment. Guys, cancel the rocket program, cancel the funding. We're not doing it anymore because this guy has said that it's going to pollute, It's just, there's this sort of element of, when you voice out your opinion, you feel like you have something important to say, but it's just creating entropy in the universe. And there is that element of maybe, I think part of when you come to think about superiority is knowing what to dismiss and what to acknowledge, right? And of course, if you get that, oftentimes that's right, because when you're superior, you know the right way forward, and you do that, and the others have the opportunity to decide if they want to follow you as their leader, right? And then people have that trust and faith in you that you will find that way. Now, of course, sometimes that requires you to be hard and firm and say, we're really doing this and we're doing the hard things to make it happen, right? And there needs to be a softness as well to take on board where you might be getting it wrong and to be flexible and adaptive and to change and to hear conversation points where people are saying things you don't like, hurting the environment, doing this and that, whatever it may be, regardless if it's truth or not, it's about being heard and being in the conversation space. So that, I think, is there. But we have to step back and look at the Starlink project and say, okay, so we're going to really cancel this. Are we going to really deny all these kids that opportunity? I lived in Cambodia for nearly 3 years. I've seen the power that 5G internet can have to transform a rural community. I've seen it. They're literally live, right? It's incredible. It's incredible. And it's very easy to sit back in an environment where you have access to those technologies and say other people don't need them. When it can be transformational and for those people. And I think that is a really good reason to consider supporting Starlink as a project, as providing the global infrastructure for humanity to come together, to come online together.
All right. So on this note of supporting humanity and this podcast, it's been great having this conversation with you. And I think if someone has to listen to the past 3 podcasts that we've done, we've started with AI and users like you and I can relate to it. And then we've moved on to Boeing, which was like, a bit in the space. Right, in the shadows, and also was in the sky. Yes. And then you went to Starlink, which is like the space. So there's a nice trajectory there. Yeah. Right. So thank you, Jan, for your time. And thank you to listeners for listening to us.